In 2023, the average person carried about $81 in cash. By 2024, according to the Atlanta Fed, that number had dropped to $67. We are carrying less physical currency, not just because we are going digital, but because the nature of how we pay for our existence has fundamentally shifted. We don't really buy things anymore. We subscribe to solutions for problems we didn't used to have. Most financial commentary focuses on the visible taxes, federal, state, sales, and property. But there is a silent second tax bracket that doesn't appear on any government ledger. It is the cost of convenience required to maintain a modern dual income life. It is the price we pay to buy back the time we sold to our employers. When we look at why the middle class feels squeezed despite rising wages, the answer often isn't in the tax code. It is in the structural overhead of efficiency. We are being taxed by our own lack of time. To understand this, we have to look at the architecture of a standard household. Let's imagine a theoretical couple, the Parkers. They represent the median. They are doing everything right on paper. They have 2 jobs, 2 cars, and 2 kids. They are part of the 49.6% of married couple families that, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2024, rely on dual incomes. 50 years ago, one income was often enough to cover the overhead. The second person, usually the mother, handled the domestic logistics, cooking, cleaning, childcare, and household management. Today, with both Parkers working, that domestic labor didn't disappear. It just became a line item. The time deficit created by working 80 combined hours a week forces them to outsource the basic maintenance of life. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditures Report for 2024, the average household spends $26,266 a year on shelter. That is roughly 3.4% of total spending. You might think of a car as a one-time purchase, but in a time-poor household, it is a recurring service fee. The BLS data shows the average household spends $13,318 annually on transportation. Let's pause and look at the math for our theoretical family, the Parkers. If they bring home after taxes roughly $8,000 a month, housing immediately takes about $2,200. Transportation takes another $1,100. Now, a reasonable person might argue that transportation costs are a choice. You can buy a cheaper car. You can take the bus, and that is true to a degree. But this depends heavily on where you live. In dense cities, public transit is viable. But for the vast majority of North Americans living in suburbs with fragmented infrastructure, a reliable car isn't a luxury, it is the physical key to the office. If the car breaks down, the income stops. And this is where the corporate world offers very little help. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that in 2024, only 10% of private sector workers had access to subsidized commuting benefits. This is the most aggressive inflator in the modern budget. The non-profit Child Care Aware of America reported in 2024 that the average annual price of child care was $13,128. That is a national average. What is terrifying is the velocity of this expense. Since 2020, that cost has risen 29%. And it isn't slowing down. The Bank of America Institute found that in September 2025, childcare payments rose 5.2% year over year. Let's return to the Parkers. They have a toddler and a 5-year-old in after-school care. Let's update their ledger. Income $8,000. Housing minus $2,200. Transport minus $1,100. They are down to $2,900. Childcare is effectively a second mortgage that you pay for 5 to 7 years purely for the privilege of being able to go to work. If one parent quits to save that money, they lose career tenure and future earning potential. If they stay, they pay the tax. Now, there is a counterargument here that often comes up in financial circles. People will say, childcare is temporary. And technically, that is true. But those 5 to 7 years happen during the most critical compounding period of a young family's life. That is money that cannot be invested in the market during the years when it would have the most time to grow. Sports, tutoring, camps, these aren't just for fun in a competitive, academic environment. They are viewed by many parents as necessary investments in their child's future employability. But the drain isn't just about big-ticket items like daycare. They estimated that 39% of single adults suffer from time poverty. When you are time poor, you become price insensitive. This is a crucial behavioral economic concept. You aren't buying the pizza because you are lazy. You are buying the pizza because you are buying 40 minutes of sanity. This extends to everything. Pre-cut vegetables cost 3 times more than whole ones. A gym membership you barely use but keep, just in case you find an hour. Let's look at the Parkers' grocery and household bill. Because they are time poor, they shop inefficiently. They rely on more processed or semi-prepared options. Update the math. We were at 2,900 minus 1,000. We often criticize the middle class for lifestyle creep, buying nicer cars or fancier phones. And certainly that exists. No one is denying that consumerism plays a role. To function in a modern economy, you need high-speed internet. You need a smartphone with a data plan not to scroll social media but to use two-factor authentication for your bank, to navigate traffic, to answer work emails after hours. You need a wardrobe that signals professional competence. There is a psychological layer here that is often ignored. When human beings are subjected to chronic low-grade stress and time scarcity, our decision-making faculties degrade. This is why the light factor, the idea that skipping coffee will make you rich, is so heavily criticized by behavioral economists. It assumes that spending is purely logical. It ignores that the $5 coffee might be the only affordable luxury available to someone who feels they have lost control over their larger schedule. Of course, this doesn't apply to everyone. If you live in a rural area with a paid-off house and a single income, your math is entirely different. If you are a high earner bringing in $30,000 a month, these costs are negligible friction. But for the middle band, the people earning between $60,000 and $150,000 a household, this is where the trap snaps shut. Let's go back to the Parkers one last time. $500. If the water heater breaks, that's 2 months of savings. This is why the middle class feels poor despite the numbers saying they are rich. They are acting as a pass-through entity for the service economy. The money comes in from the employer and immediately flows out to the landlord, the daycare center, the auto lender, and the grocery chain. 50 years ago, entertainment was playing outside. Community was the neighborhood. Support was the extended family living nearby, but you cannot budget your way out of structural overhead. The only true escape valves are radical structural changes, not incremental ones. This means rejecting the premise of the high-friction life. It might mean moving to a lower cost of living area, even if it means a pay cut, because the second rent in that area is lower. We have to stop looking at our bank accounts as the only measure of wealth. The truest metric of prosperity isn't the number on your paycheck. It is the amount of unencumbered time you possess. If you make 6 figures but have to spend 90% of it just to keep the machinery of your life running, you aren't wealthy. You are just a well-paid administrator of your own existence.